So now's the time to talk about the nuts and bolts of the class. So let's step into my office. So in terms of content, Foundations of Chinese Thought is going to be focusing on early Chinese religious and philosophical thought from the earliest written records up through the unification in 221 BCE. The main focus is going to be on the Warring States period, so the period from roughly 6th to 3rd century BCE. China is divided politically. It's very chaotic in a political military sense, but it was a time of flourishing of intellectual thought, sometimes called the period of the 100 schools. So we'll be learning about early Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, Moism, logicians, all sorts of important movements in early China, many of which were very influential later on and shaped the development of East Asian religious thought. In terms of themes, we'll be looking at individualism versus collectivism. How does the individual relate to society? How does human nature relate to culture? Emotion relate to reason? Should either one of them be dominant? We'll be looking at different models of ethics. So the three major models of ethics: deontology, maxim-based, duty-based models of ethics; consequentialism or utilitarianism. How to determine what the right thing to do involves calculating consequences; and what we'll be calling virtue ethics. So the idea that the way you become a better person is to develop new types of dispositions, new virtues that are socially desirable. In terms of learning outcomes, I want students to emerge from this class with a very solid understanding of the basics of early Chinese thought, a grasp of the basic texts and how to read texts from another culture, how these texts influence later East Asian civilization. So when we're talking about early Chinese thought, we've also got to see how this impacts what we might call the Chinese cultural sphere. So there's a huge area of East Asia where for most of recorded history, the educated classes have read and written classical Chinese and have memorized the text that we're going to be reading. So it's really difficult to overstate the impact that the texts we'll be looking at, these foundational texts of early Chinese culture, have affected later East Asian civilization. We'll also have a basic understanding of how philosophical debate works and how to evaluate philosophical arguments. So each of these thinkers is going to be arguing they're right, the other thinkers are wrong. We're going to get some practice in evaluating philosophical claims and how you would decide whether or not a philosophical claim seems valid or not. We'll also emerge with a basic understanding of human evolution, how our best contemporary understanding of culture and nature fit together, so how we understand human beings both as biological animals, but how we're unusual because of this culture, the way we've evolved to use culture. So we'll learn a lot about contemporary cultural evolutionary theory, cognitive science, and social psychology. If you have any experience taking MOOCs, you'll realize they can vary wildly in terms of how much content they have. So they can be anything from a brief introduction, kind of like a little snack, to an entire university semester's worth of material. So this MOOC, China 300X, is a latter sort of MOOC. It contains a lot of material, and because of that, we've actually broken it into two parts. So they go chronologically. Part one starts with an introduction to early China. We look at Shang and Zhou religious systems, so these systems that preceded Warring States thought. And then we look at the early Warring States thinkers, so people like Confucius and Lao Tzu and this utilitarian named Mo Tzu. We also, at the end of part one, talk about some shifts that happen in the mid-warring states that really mark this transition, watershed moments in terms of the development of Chinese thought. So the first of them is this linguistic turn. So people start to worry about language, how language hooks up with reality, how words work, how words fit together. There's also what we call the physiological turn. So people start to think about the body, about human physiology in religious philosophical terms. And this really changes the way in which philosophical debate happens in early China. So part one concludes with this shift, the linguistic turn, the physiological turn. Part two is going to focus on late Warring States thinkers, so people like Zhuangzi, the Taoist Zhuangzi, Confucians, later Confucians like Mencius and Xunzi, and then legalist thinkers like Han Feizi. We'll talk a little bit about the end of the Warring States and how China gets unified at the end of the Warring States, and also offer some concluding reflections on what it means to study religion, why we do comparative religion, what it means to do comparative religion in the modern world. So if you take both parts of this course, part 1 and 2, it's the equivalent of an entire university semester's worth of material. Now, to give you some sense of how intense the course is going to be, we're doing this in essentially 8 weeks. So you're getting a semester's worth of material in 8 weeks. The two-part structure helps to mitigate this intensity somewhat in a variety of ways. So first of all, there's a gap between the parts, so you get a rest. You get a long enough rest to kind of rest your brain and feel refreshed and come back, but not too much, so you don't forget the material you learned in part 1. If you need need a bit more of a break, you can even take part 1, say, in the fall, and then wait until the course is offered again in the spring and take part 2. It gives you a little bit more time off in between. It's also possible to take the parts separately, so they're designed to be standalone. So if you're only interested, for instance, in early Warring States material, you only want to know about Lao Tzu, you can just do part 1. If you're interested in just part 2 material, you really have a passion for Zhuangzi and that's all you want to hear about, you can take part 2. So although the 2 parts are designed to stand alone, we recommend you take them in order. So take part 1 and part 2. Part 1 gives you a lot of the background information you're going to need to understand the material in part 2. So if you do take the full part 1, part 2 sequence, you'll end up with a full university semester's worth of material in early Chinese thought and be fully qualified to move on to look at later periods of Chinese thought if you wish. So strictly speaking, the readings for this class are not required. They're recommended but not required. So the lecture videos are designed to stand on their own. They're comprehensible with or without the readings. That said, I strongly recommend that you do the readings as well as listen to the lecture videos. So they're designed to complement one another. So one way to look at it is the lecture videos give you the outline. They give you the basic outline of the material. They give you background information. They talk about connections with contemporary life and modern science. But the readings, if you then, having listened to the video, go and do the readings, then you get the real historical meat. So if you really want to get a sense of these thinkers that we're going to be looking at, these Warring States thinkers, you really want to read the primary text. So we strongly recommend that as you do the readings as the syllabus indicates. So for each module, there's going to be recommended readings. As you'll see on the syllabus, some of this reading is in PDF form. So these are open source documents. They're in some cases translations that we've gotten permissions for, or translations that are out of copyright, or sometimes my own translations that I'm just providing. So some of these are just open source PDFs. The bulk of the recommended readings, though, come from one source, this Readings in Classical Chinese Philosophy from Hackett Publishing Company. This is the main recommended text for the class. What I like about it is it's kind of one-stop shopping. It's got everything you need. All of the thinkers that we're going to be looking at have their readings not just selected, but well translated, so they're good, scholarly, accurate translations. The passages, the particular passages that have been selected for each chapter are the most important ones so that all the important concepts are covered. So basically everything you need in terms of primary texts are available in this book, Readings in Classical Chinese Philosophy. Now the issue is the first running of the MOOC, Hackett Publishing Company actually essentially donated the entire book. So they made the whole thing available through the course site for free, thinking that people would read the text and like it and want to purchase a copy so it would help sales out. That didn't happen. So basically nobody bought the book. I think understandably Hackett is not willing to continue giving away the book for free. So the new arrangement we have is that Hackett is providing the first reading. So for Module 2, we're going to be reading the Analects, actually my Analects translation. They are providing the Analects translation for free through the course site. So this will give you a chance to actually get a sense of the quality of the translation and the nice formatting and the selection of the passages. It'll also give you a chance to see how the passages complement the lectures. So you'll get a sense, at least in Module 2, without having to purchase the text, of how the two work together, how they're really meant to complement one another. Hackett is also providing a coupon code. So for students who are registered for the class who want to purchase the book, you can get a discount on the paperback edition. And they're trying to keep the price of the ebook edition low so that it's also affordable for people. So if you can afford it, we strongly recommend that you purchase this text. It'll make your experience of the class, I think, much better. So on the syllabus, you'll see for each module, we provide the recommended chapter from Readings in Classical Chinese Philosophy. We then also give you an edition, translation, neutral list of the passages or chapters, so that if you have a different translation, or if you have access to an open source translation, or if you are not a native English speaker and you're reading a translation in a different language, you can find the same passages that I'll be referring to in some other edition of the text. I do want to warn people, though, that translations from Classical Chinese vary wildly in quality. In some cases, they're really just different books, especially certain texts like the Tao Te Ching are notoriously difficult to translate, and so translations can really vary significantly. You also have to be on the lookout for translations that are not really translations. So for instance, there's probably the best-selling edition, I don't even know what to call it, of the Tao Te Ching is Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching. Now, Stephen Mitchell doesn't know a word of Classical Chinese, so he's reading various Western language accounts, and then he believes he can get into a meditative state and have direct Vulcan mind meld contact with the spirit of Lao Tzu, and that's how he's able to render the text, so not through reading actual classical Chinese. I actually quite like his rendering. It's lively, it's actually fun to read, but it's not actually a translation of the Warring States classical Chinese text. So you also want to be on the lookout, especially when it comes to the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi. People like to kind of drop acid and free associate about these texts a lot. So you really want to try to find one that's done by a real scholar, somebody who reads classical Chinese. Another thing we'll be doing, in addition to providing you with the edition neutral information about what portions, what passages to read, we're also going to be recommending when we can, in some cases we can't, references to open source translations. There are some older translations out there that are out of copy right now. We had some research assistants search around and try to find the best quality open source translations that are out there. And so for texts where we can find translations like this that are free that you can just get to online, we'll give you the link on the syllabus as well. Another text we'll be referring to on the syllabus, another bit of supplementary reading, is a trade book that I published in 2014 called Trying Not to Try. So this is a book that covers a lot of the same themes that we cover in the MOOC, but in a little bit more detail and with a little bit more exploration of how it connects to contemporary life and modern science. The publisher, Crown Publishing, has made a portion accessible free of charge in Module 1 through the class website, and it's a trade book, so it's fairly reasonably priced. But again, this is completely optional supplementary material. It's not really necessary for understanding the course. Finally, we'll also be referring you to a Facebook page that I have set up that covers both this trade book and the MOOC and this research grant we're running at UBC that's relevant to some of the course material. So if you go to that Facebook page, you'll see lots of references to newspaper articles, to online interviews, radio interviews, blog posts, all sorts of things that explore various facets of connections between the course material and, in most cases, contemporary life or modern politics. We'll also be referring you to semester-specific links that students are setting up on Facebook. The first time the MOOC ran, students set up a Facebook page for the MOOC. So we'll give you a list of, in some cases they're regional, in some cases they're language specific, but we'll give you an up-to-date list of what Facebook pages people have set up for the course. And these are helpful if you're interested in kind of exploring different facets of the way in which course material is hooking up with contemporary life, and also to have access to a discussion forum outside of the class discussion forum that may be more appropriate for the region you live in, the language you use, or the type of interests you have. In terms of time commitment, each part of the course runs for 5 weeks with about 4 weeks of content. So part 1 has 4 full modules, part 2 has 3 full modules, and then a 4th module with a little concluding material. So during weeks when there are full modules running, you probably want to budget anywhere from 4 to 6 hours per week to the course. Each week there's approximately 2.5 hours of video content. If viewed at normal speed, you can also have the option of viewing it at 1.5 or 2 times speed. There are assigned readings, so you'll have to be doing assigned readings. I'd budget at least about an hour or so a week to do the readings. There's also discussion boards, so we encourage you to participate in the discussion boards. People get a lot out of this, and it's a good way for you to interact with both me and the TAs in the class. In some cases, people set up Facebook pages, so students set up their own Facebook pages for discussing course material and posting links to other material that's related, so you may want to participate in Facebook pages. You might want to budget some time for that. There's quizzes, so at the end of each module there's a 10-question quiz, so you've got to be able to budget at least a half an hour, I would say, to the quizzes, and then there's a final exam at the end. So overall, in terms of taking the class, it's about 4 to 6 hours per week during the weeks that we have full modules running. Now, in terms of assessment, we're going to rely primarily on multiple choice assessment. So the biggest thing will be the quizzes. At the end of each module, there's going to be a multiple choice quiz that's going to cover the material from that module. It's going to be the same format, same basic idea, same format, same basic structure as the before you move on questions. So at the end of every lecture, you're going to have 3 questions that we're going to ask you to answer correctly before you move on to the next lecture. So by the time you get to the end of module 1, you already have a lot of practice answering these kind of multiple choice questions. And then at the end, we'll have a quiz that'll test you comprehensively on all the material from that module. Even if you're not taking the class for a verified certificate, we hope you'll take the quizzes. The quizzes should be a very helpful feedback on what you're getting. They'll help you learn the material. There's no makeups on the quizzes, so no makeups. We can't give you credit. It's just too big of a class. And then finally, there'll be a final exam. So at the end of the course, we'll be giving you a comprehensive final exam. So this is going to be similar. It's basically going to be like a very large version of the quizzes, and it's going to be testing you on all the material from the entire class, and that'll be at the very end of the course. Now, if you're pursuing a verified certificate of achievement, the cutoff to receive one of these is 60%. So you need to pass the course with at least a 60. Especially for those of you who haven't taken a MOOC before, but probably even for those of you who have, MOOCs are kind of weird. It's a weird format where you're not live in a room. It's very difficult to lecture to a camera. It's very difficult to be on the other side of this watching videos. So we're going to try to provide you with some sort of feedback during the course. So in the discussion forums, they'll be monitored by the TAs. So the TAs will be participating in the discussion forums, monitoring what's going on. At the middle of every module, they'll send out an announcement about interesting threads. You get kind of a live feedback on what people are talking about, what's interesting, and maybe direct your attention toward these interesting discussion threads that are going on. TAs will also be doing weekly virtual office hours. So they'll, using Google Hangout or some similar technology, you'll see the announcement. They'll have set hours where they'll be available to answer questions virtually on Google Hangout or over text or email. I'll also be doing at the end of every module a concluding video. So this is what I'm going to be asking the TAs to do, is get a sense of what people are interested in, what people are concerned about, questions or concerns, and I'll do a short video at the end of every module where I'm replying to questions from you, so people who are taking the course right now. I want to also give you a warning. We're about to launch into Module 1. Module 1 is the hardest module. It's the longest, it's got the most amount of video you have to watch. It's parts of it are technical, the cognitive science stuff we're doing, different models of ethics. You can make it through it. Don't worry. In future modules, we'll have more interviews with colleagues, we'll go on more field trips, we'll have more interaction with other people to help break up the monotony of listening to me talk for an entire week straight. We'll also break things up with a couple celebrity interludes from the British comedian Russell Brand, who's actually read my work on Chinese philosophy and has some interesting insights on how it connects to contemporary life. So a little bit of a comic relief, and it'll give us a chance to actually talk about how the material we're studying does intersect with contemporary concerns. And then finally, one last note, making a MOOC is a very strange experience. I'm used to lecturing to a class full of 200 students, and in a situation like that, it's pretty easy to get excited about the material and speak in a dynamic way. Sitting in my office talking to a camera is very odd. So I'm actually speaking to you from the future. We're reshooting this material after doing the end of, we're almost done with Module 2, so I can guarantee you that I get slightly better at talking to the camera. So I assure you that I learn slowly. So stay tough, make it through Module 1, and I'll see you on the other side. We also will potentially have a few, no, because we will have it actually. Also break things up with a few, we'll also break things up with a couple celebrity interludes. Explain beautiful music to it. Let me redo that again. Give you a taste of this. Do we want to do this? Yeah. Begins, oh, I don't want to, let me start over again. We'll only be evaluating you on, what? So overall, we're talking about a commitment of 3 to 5 hours per week. God, what was the third point?